everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Kay Thompson, and this is the Best Real Estate Company's Friday Focus. In case you didn't know, I am a principal broker here at Best Real Estate Company and typically the one that's in charge of bringing you this information. And so I hope that it is information that you're using and that you can apply in your business to help you expand, help you to just change some things that you may need to change according to what you think you should be doing and things of that nature. I do want to let everybody know that this podcast is available on Spotify and Google Podcasts. So if you have a Spotify or Google Podcast subscription, it's free to subscribe to our webcast, our podcast here. And then once it's updated weekly, you will get a notification that lets you know there's a new episode out. And then you can just go ahead and listen to that right from your phone. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into things today because I really have kind of been anxious to talk about this. And just so you guys know, I'm always teaming with ideas for how I can bring things to you, what types of things to bring. There's always so much going on in our industry. And so this week or this past week, I realized that I have, quite a bit of interesting conversation with agents in our brokerage and agents outside of our brokerage because of the community work that I get to do to help to advocate for democracy in housing. And I realized something, and that is a lot of our agents, a lot of the professionals in our industry overstep their bounds in the name of going above and beyond for their client. And sometimes, more often than not, that's not always the best thing that you should do. It's not the best route to take. It can expose you to and your clients to liabilities that you don't even think about until it's too late. And so the topic for today's podcast is going to be little things that agents don't think about that can cause big problems in a transaction down the line. So I had a very specific situation that occurred this past week that brought all of this on. Real estate agent came to me with an issue. Issue was another real estate broker wanted to keep the earnest money from the transaction. The agent gave me, parts of the story. And well, let me not say parts. I don't want to make it sound like she gave me the story from her perspective, and told me all the reasons why she thought her client should get their earnest money back. And so I, looked at the information that she provided. The first thing that I noticed was that she was outside of her time of essence. Well, her clients were outside of the terms of the time of essence that she wrote in the contract. And so therefore, technically, the seller did have a leg to stand on in order to keep the earnest money. However, as real estate agents, even if there is a mistake made, we want to try to do all that we can to make it right for our client. And so I agreed to try with this particular broker whom I knew was going to be difficult. He actually has a history of being difficult and a reputation as such. But I was like, I'm going to go to this person and hopefully apply to his sense of reason and maybe I catch him on a nice day and he'll want to play some good happy ball, but that's not what happened. And so it left us in a really precarious place. So one of the things that I want to say is when you as a real estate agent are bringing something to your principal broker and your principal broker you're asking them to provide you assistance. If you have made a mistake in the process, in the transaction, you should be able to own that as a real estate professional because That's really the very first thing that has to happen in order for the broker to be able to bring resolution for the situation. That's number one. That's the first thing that I want to say. Secondly, of all, is just like if you're a criminal on trial in court, when you speak to your attorney, even if you are guilty of such criminal activity, your attorney needs to know that so that they can prepare a proper defense based on the facts. So when you leave out information from your broker about the transaction, if they're a broker that's worth their weight, they're going to investigate all areas of it anyway. I'm going to say this with the utmost love and respect for you guys in my heart. Everything that you tell me about a transaction, I need to be able to see it in your paperwork. And it needs to line up with the story that you're giving me. You know what I mean? Your paperwork needs to line up. And I spoke about this a few podcasts back about how I did have, in all my time as the broker here, where I really had to go to bat for agents. Two of them had what I call a perfect file, which is I could read their documentation in order and see exactly what happened in the transaction based on what they were telling me. So they narrated the paperwork that I was looking at. And it makes it so much easier for the broker to go to bat for you. But when there's holes and you're telling me part of something but not the other part, I want you guys to know that I've been at this long enough to know when parts of the story are missing. And I'm quite confident when I say that my counterparts have that same ability to be able to decipher that something may be a little bit off. And we have an obligation to investigate the entire situation. So there are going to be times that you are going to bring a situation to your broker, and your broker is going to make a decision or give you some information that you don't agree with, that you don't necessarily ascribe to. And keep in mind, it's not because of a struggle between, right and wrong in terms of that dynamic with your broker. It is because the broker gets a different type of education that the salesperson isn't receiving, and therefore the broker has information that may not be privy to the salesperson. And so we also have a larger responsibility, because we can't just look to say this one transaction, especially if you haven't done the right things in the transaction. We have to protect the firm, we have to protect the brand, we have to protect the licenses of other agents, and all of that. So we are much more highly scrutinized when it comes to these issues and disputes between clients than you can imagine. And also, we don't want to steer you wrong, because real estate agents are not the people who get sued when someone wants to blame the realtor. It's the real estate broker that gets sued. So for us, it is our license on the line in addition to yours. And so we would never, at least I would never purposefully give you information that wasn't sound and that I didn't research, because I, like you, want to keep working and using my licenses to build my real estate business. So just keep that in mind. The other thing I would like for people to know is that based on our education, and this is not just for brokers, this is also seasoned real estate agents who have been around the game for a long time. Listen, we know when you have told your client something. We know when the client has gotten some information or some position or stance regarding how the transaction is going from you. There are a lot of times agents have come to me and said things that I know a buyer or seller just could not have said, because they just don't have any, it's jargon or it's a terminology or it's something, we can all pretty much tell when the agent is on the other side is pushing their client in a direction that may not be in the client's best interest because of ego or whatever. We all know when an agent, or we should be able to figure that out after we've had a few closings under our belt, that an agent is probably telling their client something in order for that client to continue to move forward with them. So make sure that you're not doing that. Some of the things that I wrote down is definitely time of essence. Time of essence is very important. And I want to make this very, very clear about time of essence. There is, in none of the states that I'm licensed in, time of essence schedules that automatically include the weekends. If you don't want to work on the weekend and you are writing an offer and you are saying we're going to need 10 days to have an inspection, Saturday and Sunday, right, are included in those 10 days unless you specify that you're meaning 10 business days. So that's the first thing I want to clarify. That's in Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri, and Ohio. Every state that I am licensed in, the rule is the same. They do not count out weekends when they are considering time of essence. Those days are included unless you specify otherwise. So, make sure that you're honoring that. And here's another misconception that I heard that is I need to debunk right now. I just can't have anybody walking around thinking this. So there is a closing date that you can request an extension for if you need that. Every real estate agent, I'm sure, understands that they can extend the closing date. But that does not automatically extend your inspections period, okay? In your contract, you are working with two timelines. One that you need to get to closing by. You need to have all these things under the buyer's responsibility completed in order for you to close. And then you have a timeline for inspections. It says, hey, we're going to need this many days, and there's usually a blank to do all of our inspections. Then we're going to give so much time for us to have conversations back and forth to figure out what the seller is willing to fix and what he's not willing to fix, and so forth and so on. And then we'll have a period where we can go back and inspect the work that was agreed upon that should be completed. If you need more time getting your inspector out there, it is necessary for you to extend the inspections period, not the closing date necessarily. Now, if you need them both extended, you need to write that specifically. But the main point I wanted to make is that, and if you need help with this, if you're in the situation now, or you call the office, call me. You can call any principal broker. Those are Malcolm Settles. If you're in Mississippi and you're a Mississippi Realtor, there is Lydia Nance in Arkansas. If you're an Arkansas agent, I can help you in any state because I'm licensed as a broker in all of them. But in the event you can't get me, and specifically if you're looking at, and just so you know, Lydia and Malcolm are also real estate brokers in the state of Tennessee. Lydia is a real estate broker in the state of Mississippi as well. So our brokers are very intelligent and knowledgeable, and I encourage you to use them before you get yourself in hot water. But that's the main thing that I wanted to point out with that is that time of essence. Just because you extend the contract closing date does not extend your inspections period. If you need an extension on the inspections period, you need to extend that. And you also need to know that unless you're adding business days to the number of days and specifying that it's business days in your contract, time of essence does not include the business days. The other thing that I wanted to talk about really is just kind of staying within your lane, telling clients things like this house needs a roof, the windows are bad because the seals are broken. Um, um, saying, things like there's a hole in the ceiling, or yeah, and saying things like that, giving your specific opinion. Oh, this how this yard has moles, things like that. That is outside of your scope of expertise, even if you know it, even if you know that's what it needs. Always refer your client to someone who is an expert, someone who has a license, who works in that field, for them to be able to tell them if there is really an issue. A lot of times that gets us caught up too. If you don't understand what things are acceptable for FHA, VA, conventional loans, what things constitute lender required repairs and what things don't, you can go to the website fha.gov and find that information. Every single thing that is an FHA requirement is not a conventional lender requirement. Everything that's a requirement for VA is not necessarily a requirement for USDA. And so we need to make sure that before we go out here and tell people things are a big deal, things are going to cost this or that, that we are making sure that we're not doing it. I mean, I think it's okay to give, people documentation, or give people a place where they can go to search out information like that. But you are not the expert roofer. You are not the expert on windows. You are not the expert plumber. You are not the expert HVAC person. There is no reason why you should be saying to these people, you need this. In the state of Tennessee, you sign a disclaimer. That's the client signs a disclaimer if the agent is following the process for documentation. But you sign a disclaimer. You have your client sign a disclaimer rather, and the disclaimer says, "I am not an expert in these areas." So if you've had your client sign that, and then you go out and become the expert saying what you know and what you don't know, and I know this is broken and I know this is that, then sometimes you can be setting them up for a failure, because it may not be what you think. Sometimes things can look a certain way on the surface and be totally different underneath. So make sure that you stay out of that area, out of those areas where you're making professional opinions about something that you're not an expert in. And a good way to be sure that you're not doing that is to read the the disclosure, the disclaimer that says you're not an expert. It tells you all the things that you shouldn't be an expert in, and then you just don't do that. If someone has questions or concerns about the condition of an item or the home itself, you should refer them to the professionals who can give them that information, namely their home inspector, the HVAC person, or whomever. Someone who has the education and the experience to be able to speak with authority to them about that issue. The next thing that I think agents don't really do well, that we should be doing well, better at, is explaining both the pros and cons of taking certain actions. I get this call all the time. Oh, they're not, my client um, is backing out of the deal. They're backing out one day before closing or 3 days before closing, and they just said they don't want it. They just want to go on to another house. That, people, is not a reason for your client to get their earnest money back. If the seller has done everything on his end to be sure that the property is in the condition that the buyer requested that it be in at closing, then I'm sorry to tell you, if your client decides 1, 2, 3 days before closing, hey, we're just going to back out because we like this other house over here, you should be prepared as an agent. If you are worth your weight you will tell that client that they're losing their earnest money. That is not even a call that typically should come to a broker. They're losing their earnest money. If you call me and you say, Kay, I have a customer, a client, we were going to close. This home home seller did all the things that we asked in our repair request, and my buyer still doesn't want to proceed. Those are going to be the first words out of my mouth. Well, did you tell your buyer they're going to lose their earnest money? Because that's exactly what's going to happen. There is no loophole for that. If you don't fulfill the obligations of your contract, you can lose your earnest money. Now, people say, oh, well, we'll just go to court. We'll just do interpleader. And then I have to explain to people individually, but then they find out after the fact. That interpleader doesn't always work in the client's best interest because A, there's a cost for it. B, if your client loses, then they're not only going to have to pay for the costs that they incurred, but the cost of the other party that wins. If that cost exceeds the amount that you have set up for earnest money, guess what? Well, you not only have you lost the earnest money, but you are also going to have to pay the difference of what the earnest money was and what the total cost for you to do all that stuff was. And so that could put your client in a even worse position. Also, a seller, one of the things a seller has to do, and it's in your Tennessee agreement as well as every other agreement that I've seen that I filled out, it says, the seller is to deliver a marketable title to the buyer. So if you're a seller, let's just say the seller does something crazy and says, hey, I don't want to sell. I had that issue last year. Found a buyer. Buyer was willing to do everything that the seller wanted. Seller was just like, I didn't get a chance to find my own house. I don't want to sell, and I'm not selling. And we actually, pushed the closing back 2 or 3 times, like for over a month, to give this guy a chance to change his mind. He was just like, I'm not changing my mind. I don't want to sell. I'm not selling. And so I had to say to him, well, you have to give this earnest money back. And I also had to share with him, there is a possibility that you could face other legal ramifications. Now, I'm not going to go into what those legal ramifications are because I'm not an attorney. But he did say, well, what other legal ramifications? I just called the attorney that was working on the transaction with me, and I said, hey, this guy wants to back out for no reason. I mean, he says he doesn't have anywhere else to go. So can you explain to him what his legal ramifications could possibly be for him not going through with this transaction for a reason that wouldn't hold up well in the courts? My attorney did that part. It was fine. I don't believe in telling people, oh, well, on a $400,000 house, your mortgage payment may be around. I have no idea about that. I'm not a loan officer. I don't know how they come up with the numbers that they come up with to give people loans. I have no idea what your loan or what your mortgage payment is going to be, and I'm not going to even guess at it. Now, what I will say is I have a list of lenders who are all rock stars. If you want to know how much you're going to be paying, and you don't have a lender, I'm more than happy to send you to these people. And based on the questions that you ask them and how they answer them, you can determine which lender is going to work best for you. And then they can share with you what they think your mortgage payment would be. But that's just not something that I would ever do. There are other little things like agents are always quick to go out and do measurements, especially in areas where there's public data and some assessor or appraiser measured. If that's the case, then let those measurements stand, especially if you know that you're not really good at taking measurements. That's not something that you do. A lot of people use these measuring room measure things from their phone. I've gotten a lot of great information from people about how much they love those, and then I've got just as equally a number of bad reviews for that kind of technology as well. So make sure that if that's not something you're sure about, that you don't go out and measure wrong and then advertise that, because that is a form of misrepresentation. And then finally, because I only have about maybe 5 minutes left before this is a 30-minute episode, I wanted to point out that if you're a realtor and you um, hopefully they still give these out. They call them the Little Blue Book Rules to Live By for Realtors. And I think a lot of times we forget that we are supposed to treat clients, fellow agents, affiliates, anybody we come in contact with in the real estate world like we want to be treated. So do unto me as unto them as you would have them do unto you. Always tell the truth, guys, even if it's not what your client wants to hear. And so that's what I was saying about the broker. Sometimes as the broker, you're my client. As an agent, I have to tell you things that you may not want to hear. But it's always the best policy to do that. Always, work to expand your knowledge and improve upon what you know about the national markets, the local markets, um, so that you can speak to those things with honesty and authority with your client. I love this. If you do the right thing, the money will follow. It took another brilliant real estate broker to show me that early on in my career. And I would say out of all the lessons that I've learned, that one for sure is the most truest. Be efficient. Time is money. So make sure you're responding responsibly to your clients. Make sure that you're staying within your realm of expertise, though. Um, and then don't overpromise and under deliver. A lot of times we talk these big games. We have this big marketing plan that we set up, but then we don't execute on that. And that kind of leaves a bad taste in a client's mouth, and it makes the industry as a whole look like we're untrustworthy. So make sure that you're doing, what you said you were going to do. Because if you're caught not doing that and you make a client angry enough, then they could charge you with misrepresentation, and that's just a whole other issue that you would have to deal with, that could take a little bit of your time or a lot of your time depending on what it is. But those are the main things. If you don't understand the rules of negotiation, I strongly urge that you take a negotiations course. NAR offers one, the Real Estate Business Institute, REBI. They offer a certification in the art of negotiation. I strongly urge people to take a course like that, because the first rule of negotiation is not how do I, win the game. The one thing that we all should be doing as real estate professionals is trying to create win-win situations. So with that being said, I am very much looking forward to next week's podcast, where we're going to be talking about agency and representation, hopefully, and we'll be able to talk about some of these scripts and things that we're getting from our trade organization, because they have pushed back the rules for implementing the Department of Justice the lawsuit policies. They have been pushed back to August. And so that gives us a little bit of time to kind of, acclimate ourselves and get our strategies around how we're going to support these new initiatives. The other thing that I want to say is that there are going to be some changes to the forms and the wording that we have on the forms in regards to compensation and things of that nature. So be sure to be on the lookout for those things. We are also having an office meeting on the 17th. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. I put it out in our weekly newsletter that should be in your emails. We're going to talk about subject to properties and how to get into that. So that's another area of investing. I hope that you guys can join us for that. We have a really big uh, event planned for the office and your family members in the community in July. So we will be having Zoom meetings or online meetings, I should say, for both May and June. And so I am hoping that this was giving good, and it gives you guys a little bit of insight into, how little things that we don't think about can turn into big issues. All of the issues that I described today can definitely get your clients' earnest money taken from them. And so we want to make sure that we are not doing things that overstep our bounds, and we are paying attention to things that we think are little, like the time of essence rules, so that we can protect our clients' vested interest. And with that being said, I thank you so much for joining me. And until next week, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye now.